Be connected again. There we go. It should be on. You see how it says 4,000? So it's like,
Where's 4,000? Let's see 4,000.
what's up, chat? Okay, so the KBS down here, it was at 400. I just restarted my hotspot. Now it's cranking. Should be good.
Even though we're getting the error message.
I mean, it at least it's showing 5,000 KBS. Before it was showing 400. So
You say it's good, we're good.
yeah. Yep. All right. So you want this tick down, or what are you thinking?
Nobody can hear us, right?
They can hear us.
Oh, they can hear us.
I can mute us if you want, but there's someone watching, so I might as well.
Start with a prayer.
So,
Let's go.
all right. Here, I'm gonna test the chat. Hello. Show up. All right. We gotta get this chat box working here. Hey, chat, can you just spam in chat so we can see the chat box? We might as well test it quick.
I can see the chat box up on the right over here.
I mean, to see if the chat's actually like popping up.
Chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Quite literal. Either works or it doesn't. All right. You want to open us up with prayer?
Sure. Heavenly Father, we ask that we choose our words wisely this afternoon as we attempt to get the younger generation and just people in generation, just people in life, where they're thinking, and they're thinking about you, Lord, and they're making their decisions based off of you, Lord. So we ask that you bless this podcast and that it may be fruitful and provide good fruit to those out there. Lord, we ask this in your name. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. Righty. Well, hello, buddy.
Yeah. Don't expect a whole lot in the second. The first streams usually get pushed pretty well, but the second one's, I don't know.
Well,
It takes a minute.
it'll be what it is. Okay, so today we are going to talk about dating and the purpose behind dating and all this good stuff related to dating. And you know, the big thing is why are we dating? Are we dating just to date, to find somebody, or are we putting the thought behind it that it deserves? I can look back and I can tell you I put very little thought behind dating when I was 15, 16. You know, there was no thought process behind it. But then as I grew spiritually, we started putting a lot more thought behind it. So you got to ask, what's the purpose of dating? Well, the purpose of dating is to find a mate. And to find that mate, first of all, you got to know what you want. So you got to think about that for a little bit. Do you want a professional woman who's going to work? Do you want kids? These are all things you got to consider, you know, but you have to know what you want before you even start dating. Because if you don't, and then you end up getting married, and then the next thing you know, you have nothing in common. So what does that look like dating? Well, I can tell you, hindsight 2020. I wish somebody would have this conversation that we're about ready to have now, of the fact that you should really have a very thought out approach to dating. There's no point of dating if you don't know what you want. Because if you don't know what you want, then you don't know what kind of mate you want. So when we think about that, how do we how do we come about selecting a partner? Because God's goal is you find your mate, you marry, and then you procreate. And you have to figure out what exactly you want. What does that look like? So you better know you before you go looking for him or her. And what I mean by that is you have to sit down and you should be asking yourself a laundry list of questions. What are no kidding deal breakers for you? And let's look at it, from a biblical perspective. You should be trying to match what you want out of life.
You also, there's the what and what you want, but there's also the why you want it, or what your motive is behind it, because Bible is very clear on lust and very clear on, I was reading something in Exodus the other day. It literally went through every kind of person you shouldn't basically sleep with besides your wife. Like, it was very clearly laid out. So people are like, the Bible isn't very clear about it, but it was just like, not this person, not that person. So it's just like why you do it, the intention behind it. As far as I understand, I've never, but then also the what you want in it, and just I think balancing the why with the what, and then also how to go about it. Because I remember when I was in high school, I was like, how would I even start dating or whatever? It's like I don't even know. So the how, the why, and the what I think are very important. And which one do you think is first? The why, the what, or how you go about it? Like, which one do you think will be the first?
Well, you should be writing out a list of questions or a list of beliefs. What do I believe in?
Yeah.
What does marriage look like to me? Do I want to have a wife who's a traditional wife that stays home? Or do I want to have a wife that's a professional? How many kids do you want? What qualities am I looking in a mate? Am I looking for somebody who just provides me a bunch of fun, or am I looking for somebody who has how would I put that? Who compliments me, that allows, especially for men. Men have a hard time because, if they're vulnerable to a woman and she uses it as a club against them, that's not a partner I want. And honestly, if that's the kind of person that she is, that she's going to take a vulnerable thing and hammer you with it, you're not going to ever open up to that individual again. So again, you have to know, what do I like? What do I like in that person? What is my ideal marriage look like?
From the serving perspective, who is someone that you can serve with, alongside, and with that, in God's work, right? Especially because if you're not a Christian, then, I don't know why you would go for this stuff. But if you claim to be one, if you claim to want to walk with God, you got to think about seriously why you're doing stuff. And if you can't, if it's just about the looks or just about the outside things, you got to also think on the inside, the heart and stuff. And just so you know, when you lean back.
Yep, I got it. I'm checking the chat.
Yeah, at least it shows up. It's just it comes down to, can you work with them well? Can you serve with them well? And also, like you're saying, like, ideal future, right? Like if they want to go this way and you want to go that way, and also, are they a believer? Or are you a believer? Like, how closely aligned can you guys be with your goals? As far as from I've heard from a lot of godly men, it just makes things simpler down the road.
Oh, it absolutely does. If you have somebody who is on board with you on what you want to do in life and how you want your marriage to go, and you've had those critical discussions, there's a lot of blended religious marriages. You might have Jews marrying a Catholic, or you could have a Buddhist marrying a Christian. Um, well, to me, there's only one way, and that gate is very narrow, and that's through Christ. So that's a potential right there. If you meet somebody and they check all your boxes of what you expect, except for the religion is a no. They're not willing to compromise. You're not willing to compromise. That's going to be a stress throughout your entire marriage until the day you die. So those are the kind of conversations you need to be thinking about, or how they treat you. You know, if you're a woman and they want to treat you terribly like property instead of a partner, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
You want to get rid of that person. And too often dating is in this day and age, talking with even my 28-year-old son, and it's viewed as a hookup more than anything else. And you're already setting yourself up for failure, because what ends up happening is, once you start engaging in sexual activity pre-marriage, then you become Twitter pated, for those who have watched Bambi, and all those flaws, they melt away, but they're still there in that person. So if you complicate a relationship with sex, then what ends up happening is, like I said, those endorphins take over. You get that, oh, I'm in love, and you can only see that they're perfect. And then 3-4 years later, next thing you know, you find out there's all these flaws that you would have never tolerated had you taken the time to just literally sit back and think. And that's the key. That's the key of what we want to do in this podcast.
I think a great filter with good and bad things is that good things usually take a while to come.
Absolutely.
So if you just are patient with not just dating, but with anything in life, I think that you can start to filter out and even deal with some of those issues instead of just taking it on, and going in blindly, and all of a sudden it blows up in your face. I've seen that happen to a lot of people my age. It just blows up in their face, and we don't want that to happen to you guys. And by God's grace, He's shown me these lessons before I went and made all those dumb decisions, and which will keep me from doing them in the future. But do you have any stories about, in the military, without names, of when that went wrong and when it went right? Let's start with the wrong.
We can start with. Okay, so for those that don't know, I served 25 years in the military. I was a first sergeant for about 4 years of my military career, which first sergeants are charged with the morale and welfare of their troops. So, where it went right, God-centered. So marriage is really easy. Marriage is like a three-legged stool, as I like to say. It can be very, very easy. It's you, the woman, and God. Now, if any one of those pull out of that marriage is destined to fail. If the wife pulls away, or the husband pulls away, or if you take God out of it, it's more than likely destined to fail. I have seen things where the guys run around on the girl, on the wife. I've seen where the wives ran around on the husband, and it really starts as easy as this. One, they had no clue what they really wanted. Number two, they let their heart be hardened. To be quite honest, that's the easiest way for the devil to destroy a marriage. You knew what you were getting into with your partner, if you've done your research, because you know what you want and you know what they want.
And as far as I understand hardening the heart, it really comes down to when you break your conscience a lot.
Yeah.
I just listened to a sermon about that yesterday. Like, your heart can get hardened when there's a decision before you and you ignore your conscience. You ignore what you're supposed to do.
And you know,
it's a little thing every day that you ignore.
It's the little white lie. You know, the first time your wife catches you in the little white lie, you know, that's a breach of trust. You know, you start at a certain spot through life based off of your actions on how much trust you have. And the more good things you do, guess what happens? The trust builds. But every time you tell that little white lie, guess what happens? You start undercutting that trust. And then next thing you know, man, the marriage has failed. Now, why is that? Well, one, you sit there and something that annoys you about your wife that you say, hey, you know, or husband that you just didn't really talk about, or you didn't think about it. When you didn't talk or think about that thing, and then all of a sudden you find it annoying, but instead of addressing the issue, what you end up doing is you start building resentment, or the devil starts building resentment. It depends on how you look at it. Me, from a spiritual battle, you know, being married 28 years to the same woman, there have been times that me myself have let my heart get hardened. You know, start going, oh, I just really can't stand why, you know, she does this, and it just really, and I won't speak my mind, and I'll hold it in, because that's what us guys are good at doing. We're really good about holding it in, especially if somebody has violated your trust. And it starts eating at you. And then what you used to look at as a loving wife, the next thing you know is, as you start picking each and every single fault out, the next thing you know, you find you cannot stand to be around this person. Well, that means your heart's been hardened, because you were united through God, through marriage. And so if you notice yourself thinking, you know, negatively about your spouse, that's a conversation that you should probably be having with your spouse. It is also,
and it's always
a conversation you should be having with yourself of, hey, we got things at work here that are trying to undercut our marriage, and my thinking is one of it.
And one thing you always got to talk about too is, you know, some people will go bring in other friends and people into that relationship, in that conversation. And as far as I understand biblically, you first deal with your brother, or in that case, the spouse, / person you're dating if you have a problem. And then you would bring in a trusted friend, not just any friend, like taking sides. No, you would bring in a trusted friend, or like, right, an elder of a church or something. And then you would bring it to a group of Christians, right? But so many people just make it a whole war. And I've seen that, not so much in my own family, but in other families, where this one marriage, it just becomes a civil war in their own family, and a house divided against itself falls.
Absolutely, every single time.
And it made me think of this verse I just pulled up. So let me zoom in on it. So, therefore, having put away falsehood, let one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. 26. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down in your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. Right? Like, talk about it every day. Don't let it wait another day, because then your problems will stack, and you'll
and resentment builds.
Yeah.
So that's spot on, because the devil is always looking to destroy what is beautiful. That's what he's here to do. He is looking to destroy the perfect creation. So if at night you're mad at your wife and you don't want to have the conversation, well, you go to bed mad, and then what do? You wake up mad, and then something else happens which sets you up higher and higher, and the next thing you know, after your day's work, you come home, and then you still got the unresolved issue, and then the wife starts talking to you, you're annoyed, you don't want to talk, and it just builds and builds and builds. The resentment builds.
And it's so easy, because the guys will stop listening, the woman won't feel listened to, and then then you're just two people living in a condo and you don't talk to each other, or you guys argue all the time. I've seen both cases. I knew a guy.
It can become a vicious circle.
I knew a guy. I won't say where, but I knew a guy who he was in his late 50s, and his wife. They lived in the same house, and he didn't believe divorce to be biblical, which I don't think is either. But she just completely shut down, and she hadn't talked to him in 10 years. Just to be like, just would text him, "Hey, you need to take out the trash." They stayed in the same house, and it was awful, and it just was eating him alive, and like, and it just put him in a load of trouble. And he realized too late what had happened, and I don't think it was both. It's always both their faults, but
Oh yeah, it takes two to tango. Make no mistake.
but it was just like so sad to see and hear about.
What was the end result of that marriage?
It's still going on like that.
It's still going on.
Yeah.
But zero communication. So they're together but lonely. And that's
But
sad in its
he
own.
had told me that she had a really rough childhood, and then that those things came in later. So
Okay.
like again, watching out, like, is it okay to deal with those things with someone you date? Yes, but you got to think about the long term. Like, if they haven't wrestled or dealt with the problems of the past, are they going to be able to wrestle and deal with the problems of the future? And
Oh, 100% true. You know,
now no one's perfect, give it grace, but just remember, if there's unresolved trauma or unresolved, people can live with it, but it's going to be difficult, and some things just take time.
yeah,
But
and all marriages are going to go through an up and down point.
yeah,
I mean, there's highs and lows, and then there's times. The key is to realize when you're in the funk and your wife's in the funk. Like I can tell you how good my marriage is going by how the cabinets in the kitchen slam. If they're closed nice and gentle, we are good. If the cabinets are slamming, I need to have a conversation, because that's my wife's subtle sign of saying, "Hey, we need to talk." And that's what we do. I'm like, "Okay, oh, nothing's bothering me, honey." I said, "Honey, I've been married to you 28 years. I know I'm far from a perfect man, but I know when you are bothered by something."
that's why you have to take the time to get to know somebody, because some people are so quiet, and so
Yep.
like my grandma is so private, like it just takes a lot of time, and of course my grandpa knows her well, but I'm just saying, like, if you marry someone who's quiet, they may not slam the cabinets. It might be a subtle thing, like they might walk a little faster, they might whatever, but there's always cues that you can watch out for. Just notice patterns in people, and
Well, and that goes to knowing your partner.
yeah.
And early on in our marriage, like I said, I could always, like, when things weren't going right, and it's not like she was being mean, it was just her way. It's just the way she expressed that I'm not happy with you right now. And honestly, it was usually me neglecting my wife and not talking to her about what the issue was, which is exactly why we're having these conversations. Because the thing is just think, if you've sat there and you've thought through every single thing, what your likes are, what your dislikes are in a partner. If you're, I sit there and I watch all these videos on YouTube, and these girls or young women sitting there going, "I want a man who makes at least 6 figures and is over 6'4" tall." Well, that's less than 1% of the world's population. So right now what do you got to do? You got to be realistic about your standards. The question is, how do you want your life to be? How do you want your life to go? Life is tough as it is. Do you want to make it tougher by choosing the wrong partner?
And the thing about people with unrealistic standards, now having good standards, you still have to wait for.
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
there's not a lot of solid Christian guys as there used to be maybe in the
20 years ago, 30 years ago.
exactly. But having unrealistic standards, if you have those, you're often impatient as well. So the girl that wants the 6 foot, the 8 foot tall guy who makes $1 million a year, well, it's like, well, he might exist, but
Is he a Chad and he's out running around on you when?
but also, what do you want to? And even then, if that kind of guy saw you, would he want to date you?
Yeah.
Right. And it's just because you got to look in the mirror and say, what's wrong with me? And why would someone want to date me too, and what's good? And
And it's also about knowing your own weaknesses.
yeah.
If you tend to be a passive person, then and your partner is a passive person, that can very much cause strife in the relationship because nobody wants to communicate because nobody wants to make anybody feel bad. But that boils down to you got to tell the truth. Now, you don't have to be mean about it. If you're sitting there being mean and screaming at them, ineffective. But if you can go, it really bothers me that you do X, Y, and Z, you know, um, and this is something we need to talk about. And then you have that conversation about whatever X, Y, and Z is. But the key is go to bed and go to bed not angry and not building on the previous day's mistakes because we all make mistakes, right? Every day. We're a sinner every day. So you want to try not to make those same mistakes. Um, but you have to sit there and go, what does my perfect girl look like?
You can often look at yourself, and if you have these like crazy standards that aren't based off the Bible, then it's like, what are you really wanting? And then sometimes you can look at your own character if you write out both and be like, maybe I need to look at that, Like I haven't been reading the Bible lately, and I have these crazy unrealistic standards, and it's like maybe go do that for a while and look at it again in a month, and
Oh, absolutely.
because not everything is set in stone. Like with this victim mindset, everyone's like, man, I have this problem that no one cares about, so therefore I can't change and do anything. It's like, no, we have malleable minds, we have malleable bodies. Like if you're weak, you can choose to be strong by doing the proper things. You can choose to be intelligent by reading and not taking in certain things, and it's a lot of things that are a choice. It just takes time and patience to get there. It's a skill set.
Well, absolutely, it's a skill set. But again, it's knowing you, and it's also you knowing yourself and knowing what your faults are, and it's also knowing what your strengths are, and also knowing what your weaknesses are. Because if you can find a woman, from a guy's perspective, if you can find a woman that complements your weaknesses, boy, you want to talk about a powerful couple. Because she's got your back, she sees your blind spots, and she can come in and she can go, hey, this situation, this is kind of one of your weaknesses. You're setting our family up for failure if if you're not cognizant, which in turn is again the perspective you take at it. If she's trying to help you be more successful, holy buckets, that's what you want in life. So that's what I say. You got to sit down and you need to write that list of questions.
What's so great about the biblical mindset is if your goal is to serve God, to serve others, then like I've heard a quote that like the reason you don't feel loved is because you aren't actively loving, right? So it's like this paradox, but it's actually very simple when you look at it. Not easy, but simple biblically, where it's like I seek to serve God and to seek, for the guy to serve her and for her to serve the guy in the marriage, in its proper place, the right, putting God first and then them second, everything else, right? There's structures to it, but doing it in the right context, you can really, and another thing I wanted to touch on too, I was thinking about the other day, just randomly, was I've seen a lot of great men marry not great people. I've seen a lot of great ladies marry not great people, but the few rare couples I see where there's a great lady and a great man, they serve and they get so much done and they impact the community, right? So my great aunt unfortunately passed away, but the funeral there was person after person that said, man, Marlene, she helped me with this, she helped me with that, she helped me with this insecurity, whatever. And then with the book club, this group of ladies, she encouraged them, and like just the entire community. There's just stories, and a few generations of people within the same families were impacted, and they just uplifted the whole community, right? So it's just like, I think for us young people, we should really be shooting to become a high caliber person and just take the extra time to look for a high caliber person, based on a biblical standard. Because I was just thinking about, it was interesting, like with the rare couples where there's a great person who took the time to become a great person and invested in themselves, and then also, and then they invest in each other and serve each other, just the impact they have, and then the kind of kids they have, the kind of church community they help build, and just the relationship with God they have is very impactful. And that's just one, and then you build a community out of that. I was fortunate enough to go to church in Colorado. There was at least 5-6 families who were like that, and it was amazing to see the impact they had. It changed my life. So
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more than amazing. It's just absolutely beautiful when you see those people that are impacting the local community, because they become one flesh, as God commands us to be. One flesh out of two becomes one. And when you have that couple that has taken the time and they've left the sexually charged emotions out of it, and they focused on getting to know the person, having a conversation with the person, and figuring out that they are the perfect partner or not the perfect partner, without any sexual relations involved. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
I can tell you, because I did not, and part of the reason we're doing this podcast is because I don't want you guys to repeat the mistakes I made. I did not wait till marriage. And, I told both of my boys, both of my boys, we had pretty good conversations, and they go, what's your biggest regret? And I said, not waiting till I was married. And they go, really? That's your biggest regret, Dad? And I said, absolutely. I said, because if you only know one woman, you don't know what it's like to be with any other woman. And
you don't have that in the back of your mind all
you
the
don't
time.
have that in the back of the mind of how Rhonda rocked your world. And in conversations with my brother, he's like, yeah, I want my kids to go out and sow their oats. And I'm like, not me, not one bit. The diseases they got going around, heck no. Between AIDS, herpes, there's a form of syphilis out there that's basically uncurable. I mean, I think they got super gonorrhea out there. It's just crazy. And why do you want to have to explain to your partner, well, when you do find that right one, well, my previous partner gave me an STD that doesn't go away,
If they're a good person, they're just going to leave.
Yep.
Because they're going to be like, I'm going to find someone who did wait, and
yep. If that's what they're looking for. Like I said, too many people don't put thoughts behind it. What do you truly want? Do you want a stay-at-home mom? Do you want, is it important to you that your kids are homeschooled? Those are all conversations you have to have, especially if you're raising your children in a Christian setting. Now, for non-believers, it still applies. I'm not telling you that you have to believe in Christ. That is not my point. My point is to make your life easier. That you're taking the time, you're sitting down and going, what do I really want?
And I think for me, like, there's been a few things where, like, for example, I've probably ran like 10 business ideas this year, or this in 2024, right? And I look back, I'm like, what if I just had picked one? So it's like knowing what you want and then deciding to stick with that. It makes everything so much easier, because like I tried to run this gaming channel and then this agency and then with this full-time job and serving the church. It's just like and then I ended up doing mostly none of it. Month by month. It was just why I was distracted.
Too many masters.
Yeah, it's just like we only have so much time. We can only master so many things. So it's like, especially with relationships, if you stand in the back of your mind, you're just going to hurt them and hurt yourself, as far as I understand people, because you're going to be like, well, I might want this. And then if your standard changes the next day emotionally, then you'll give mixed feedback. There's this thing in psychology, I think, where like they did an experiment and they gave kids one time they would basically like they would ground them. They'd have their parents ground their kids on a no, and then the next day they would ground them on a yes. So it was inconsistent feedback. And what that did to the kids' mindset and their morale within a week was crazy. And most kids get that their whole lives. We're raised in a culture that's the standard. I look at how media and, what YouTube and the algorithm likes every day. That's one example. And that changes, right? Mr. Beast talks about that all the time. Well, that's why you need to base it on a biblical standard, on an old, true book, right? I'm reading through the law right now, and it's just everything. Like, here's how you be clean. Don't eat this. Here's how you treat this. Here's what you do with someone who's sick. And God just lays out this entire standard. I'm like, what a great life that'd be, because they didn't have to think about it. They didn't have to.
It was very clear.
Yeah.
But what was the problem with the law, the way it was written? It was same thing. We're not perfect.
Yeah. But we can always shoot to be better.
But we can shoot to be better. Exactly. And that's the goal. Hey, guys, you are going to mess up in life. It's just a fact. Even this great retired senior master sergeant, he's made his fair share of mistakes. Well, I'll tell you a story about. So I had to. So there was this young lady who came in the military about the same time as I did, right? And at first, this young lady was pretty well outgoing. She was already married when she came in the service. And year 1 goes by, year 2 goes by, year 3 goes by. And I kind of noticed that this individual is just not happy.
Were you married at this point?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. No, I think I was probably dating my wife at about that time. But anyway, well, actually, no, I would have been married at that time because I was a staff sergeant, and then she was a senior airman. I progressed just a hair faster than she did, rank wise. But I'd come into the driver's lounge, and there's this lady. Her name was Lori. She was moping around, da 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 da. And this is why it's important to talk and know, and know your audience and talk to people. And I was in a real good mood, and I didn't even think about it. I'm like, Lori, would it hurt you just to come in one day and be in a good mood? And what she said absolutely floored me. She goes, would you be in a good mood if you just found out your husband is having an affair with somebody else? Wow. Huge, right? So marriage in trouble. And as a supervisor, as a young supervisor in the Air Force, it taught me a huge lesson. Instead of, going, would it kill you? Why not pull that person aside and say, hey, you all right? I noticed, you used to be pretty chipper and things ain't going right. And unfortunately, that marriage ended.
And the thing with people and anything that has a good amount of leverage behind it, like a tool, like you can kill someone with a shovel or you can dig a hole, right? So think about marriage, right? It's God made it to represent his relationship with the church as a representation, right? So the marriage, it's meant to build you up and make you more like Christ. But if the devil can take that and it can chip away at everything you are because you married someone or who isn't trying to help you out, isn't trying to, it's not a mutual thing,
Yeah, didn't have your back, doesn't have your best interest in mind.
And it chipped away at her.
Yep.
Imagine what that did to her, look at her 4 years ago versus when she found out that day.
Yep.
Look at her morale, and it wasn't, it's because of the kind of man and what he did,
yep.
And
it was absolutely devastating to her.
And those kind of scars don't really go away as far as
and then I compounded the situation, if you really think about it.
Yeah.
Because now, granted, after that, after she made that statement, I said, come on, let's go talk in my office. And we kind of hammered things out and I said, well, these are kind of your options. Here's where you're at, just trying to be a good friend. Cause a good friend would have already known what was going on. And I let her down in that aspect. But that's how we learn. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way, but the key is when, somebody seems off, whether it's your wife, your girlfriend, you might want to find out what's going on in their life. Because if you're going to be a team forever, you got to have those conversations. And basically, when it boiled down, they both quit talking to each other. And then he decided to step out. So
everything affects everything.
Absolutely. The only good thing was there was no kids in that marriage. So it made it a little bit easier, a little. It's still, like I said, it's terrible, but because it is God's intention that you stay with the same person year after year after year, and that's what you got to do. You got to find out what you want. What are your standards? And you better have a list. And I mean, it's not like first date, you pull out your list, slap it on the table by any means.
Here's my menu item. Yeah.
Here's my menu items. Or you have a list, and as you're going on the date, you're checking, yep, nope.
Balance of things, right?
Balance of things. You got to get to know the individual. But again, that's why it's important to keep the I love yous, the
Hey Nick, we're actually talking mostly about marriage right now, so this works out. This is an old viewer of mine. Welcome.
You got to you just make those mental notes, and then you have to decide what you want. Whether you want to pursue that anymore. If you go out on a date and you meet somebody, and then you find when you're talking, and you find out, well, I'm pro-abortion. Well, as a Christian man, I am not for abortion. Every life is precious.
And then you have two options in that scenario, right? You can either
What's the option?
Quit and leave, or you can talk through it until you both agree on it.
Yeah. But honestly, if
but some things are non-negotiable.
Yeah, they're non-negotiable. Because we all have our standards, and not everybody's standards are the same. But you got to know what are your kid deal breakers, and why is that so important? It's so important because if you can't have a conversation, or that conversation leads to a fight every single time, again, you are going to be dealing with that for the rest of your life if you choose to marry that individual. And honestly, knowing that going in, that the belief is different and it's going to be a bone of contention, you really have no excuse when you're called up to the good Lord and he goes, well, why, and you're judged. Whoops. And you're judged. When you're judged like that, you have no excuse.
Now, what if it's like a little thing? Like, let's say there's a secondary theology, right? It's not a salvation issue where it's like, a slight value difference, because those will probably come up. No one's perfectly aligned. What do you do in those scenarios?
That's where you have a conversation. I mean, if it's a small theological difference, it's probably not going to be a huge issue. It's not, like I said, it's not like you're going Hindu versus Christian.
Yeah.
It may be, well, I'll give you example. Catholic versus Baptist. There's huge theological differences. Catholics, you go through your priest, who then goes to.
I also learned recently a lot of them think that you lose your salvation, while a lot of Protestant think you can't. So there's just different things like that. Like big
the real
issues.
question is did you ever have it to begin with?
Yeah, but there's just these big topic differences, and
But you have to iron that kind of stuff out, or go, this is a small theological difference, but we need to kind of figure out how we're going to handle this when and if we have kids, you know, because it's just like, you know, there's kind of well, it's just like the tribulation argument. You got the pre-trib, you got the during, and then you got post-tribulation raptures.
the thousand views in between.
And the 1,000 views in between. But when you look at it, you know, in the grand scope of things, is whether you're a pre-trib, a during, or post-trib, is it really a deal breaker if everything else is you believe in Christ?
And I always think about it this way, because people are like, how much does this actually matter? How often do you end up talking about those things? If you
Yep.
talk about it once a year,
Probably not huge.
it's just like family politics during Christmas. 99% of the time, you won't think about it. It doesn't actually apply to anything. Now, I'm not saying that about theology. I'm just saying about any kind of standard difference, right?
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I've never dated, but
Well, and I'll tell you, when I did most of my dating, I was not thinking the way I currently think now. And again, my goal, at least, is to help you think about, hey, what do I really believe? What are my red lines in the sand? What is the, the red flag that guy or gal is throwing up to you? You know, if the guy's sitting there opening your door left and right and treating you right, it could wasn't trying to rhyme, but
those are the best ones.
if they're treating you right and you have a ton in common and your beliefs are aligned and you have made a decision that, okay, I'm going to ask this girl to marry me, you've lined everything out. Absolutely. You know how you want to raise your kids. You know how you want your kids to be educated. You know what kind of church you're going to attend, all that kind of stuff. So all those fights are already done away with because you've already had the conversations.
And you always have your individual devotions with God. You don't trade those. But then on top of that, as far as what I hear and have seen in other good couples, is that they grow together. So they have all this friction, these differences, but then they grow together. They become intertwined.
Yep. From 2 to 1. Think about that. Pretty powerful. And it makes life a heck of a lot easier. Heck of a lot easier when it comes to if you grow together versus growing apart and knowing it. So let's see. Just looking at what some of the chat's saying.
Yeah.
And if you guys got questions, that you've thought of, hey, what's my thought on it? By all means, you can go ahead and you can throw something in there.
And if you're watching this in the video form or the stream form, leave a comment. We can
leave a comment, like, and subscribe. But we can always circle back and touch base.
Subscribe bell, yeah.
Yeah, subscribe. Absolutely. But I mean, it can be as simple. I mean, there's other things you got to think about. It can also talk about food choices. I mean, food choices can be a huge issue in a marriage. If you got somebody who prefers to eat fairly clean, and then you got somebody that wants to go out and eat all the time,
beer, Twinkies in their hand versus lettuce and kale or something.
Right? That's going to be an issue. That's going to be an issue because.
Medicine, drinking, smoking, all those topics. You got to talk about
topics. You have to talk about them. And the reason it's so important is because if you're bringing kids to that and dad is sitting there and all he eats is meat and potatoes, or he goes every day and picks up fast food, you're going to end up with unhealthy chicken farming. unhealthy children in the end.
Or I bring on balance because it's like, oh, dad will always take me to the gas station, get me a donut, but mom's always making me whatever, or the other way around. It's like,
I want that because I don't get fast food, you know.
versus if they were just like, mom and dad both agree on it, I have to go to my friend's house to get that, but by then I shouldn't even want it because I was raised right, you know.
And like with our kids, you know, we had a rule with our kids. You had to try something 15 times. And you had to spit it out on your plate 15 times.
He did that to me while I worked for him, and it really does work. And I can eat all sorts of things.
So there's actually a psychological thing behind it. So say it's broccoli and you absolutely hate broccoli, which I love. I love good steamed broccoli with a little bit of salt, pepper, and garlic on it, and a little bit of rice, and maybe some hamburger mixed in with it. Oh yeah, really, really good. Broccoli, rice, and burger. Broccoli, rice, and like beef chunks. Those kind of things.
You had some like good cheddar cheese on that.
And if you like cheese, Parmesan cheese. Cheddar cheese, it doesn't really matter. But the whole thing is we were on the same page when it came to our kids and how they were going to eat. Eating out was more or less viewed as a treat, and usually when we were on a road trip, it wasn't something that we regularly did because it just wasn't. One, fast food is extremely expensive for what you get. You know, a family anymore, a family of four, it can run you about $40. You know, if the kids are 8 or
do
older.
DoorDash, and I'll grab like a Subway sandwich or something, and I'll just get this huge bag with this tiny little, not just Subway, any restaurant. I'm like, they're paying me $10 just to get this tiny little. It's just like there's way better ways to do it.
They paid almost the cost of the sandwich to have it delivered.
Double sometimes.
And that comes down to another thing that you better be clear on is finances. Finances in a relationship, 100% critical. If you're marrying a gal or a guy who wants the latest and greatest of everything, you are going to be broke your entire life.
You don't want to babysit anyone in the area, you know.
You know, so finances are a key thing another key thing that my wife and I sat down and we talked about, you know, because originally my wife said she wanted to work and I honored that. And so after my first son was born, she's like, I want to go back to work. And it'd been 3 or 4 months. And I said, sure, if that's what you truly want. And so we got daycare and we did that. That lasted for about another 4 months. And she goes, I really want to stay home and I want to take care of my kids. Because she was sitting basically working, and you know, in a month she was bringing. By the time she paid child care, she was only bringing in $400 extra a month. You know, and she was burnt out, wore out. But you know, it was one of those things. I didn't feel that.
Especially if she's sitting there all day. Oh man, I want to be home, you know, like, yeah.
And then basically she sat down, she goes, I would really like to quit my job. And I said, babe, if that's what you want to do, we can make it. And that's what we did. She stayed at home and she pretty much, once the kids got, 10 or 12, then she would pick up an odd job every once in a while. You know, but nothing, just more for her peace of mind because she didn't have as much to do at the house. But that's how we chose to raise our kids. That they weren't latchkey kids, and it was amazing because meaning they had the key, they're the ones opening the door. Oh, yeah. Parents aren't home, and
they had a mom.
They had a mom, exactly, And the amazing thing is when my kids, you know, as they got 12, 13, and they had more sleepovers, it was amazing to hear the kids because my kids were used to homemade food 3 times a day. And so, you know, a typical Saturday morning at the Puffer house was was usually pancakes, sausage, eggs,
Sounds glorious.
hash browns type breakfast. And the kids come over Friday night, and then we cook this big breakfast, and they're like, "Man, this is awesome! I get this amazing food." Typically, I just microwave fish sticks, and then Sunday always at our house was biscuits and gravy. It was just kind of the day we picked out that we had the biscuits and gravy. And then Friday night was pizza night. And I usually made the dough before I went to work, and then because I love to cook,
You can make a killer steak. I was lucky at my job.
yeah, I can do that too. But I love to cook, and so I'd make the pizza dough, and then come home after work on a Friday night, and then we would sit there and we'd make personal pan pizzas for our kids. And the cool thing is they would get their pizza, and then they get to put whatever toppings they want on it, and then we cooked it. We had a big enough stove that we could cook all 4 pizzas at the same time, and then eat as a family. And it's something that my kids will do. They'll make pizzas with their kids.
And that just brings up a good framework. It is like when you're, at least this is the way I would want to do it, is like, what would make good memories for my kids? And
that's what life's about.
Exactly.
It ain't about money, folks. If you're on the search for money, you are setting yourself up for failure. Because money will never make you happy.
And I've read 50 business books basically. And the people that have money are the ones who don't really want it. They just get really good at the game because they focus not on the money, but on serving and solving problems for people, right? So it's processes and systems and
serving. Look at Elon Musk. He paid $44 billion for Twitter, and it wasn't even worth it. But why did he do it? He did it because he saw what was going on in our media and how they were basically spoon feeding us lies and censoring information. And he just couldn't stand it anymore. And so something that was probably worth 20 billion, he paid 24, and people go, "Oh, that makes him a terrible businessman." No, in a sense, it makes him very righteous in the sense that he knew that platform was being used for bad.
And why is he the richest man in the world? Is because most people cash out, right? They're like, I have a $500 million business. He puts everything back in it, right? I mean, he's not doing it for the money, because basically it's like, let's say you made $1 billion investing. You're like, whoa, you put all that back into your investment, and it could all go away tomorrow, right? Yep. So that's what he did, and that's why he's worth, I think he crossed $400 billion, I heard.
Yeah, I think he's actually closer to 500 billion.
Well, it's exponentially faster, so he's going to be a trillion in like 5 years.
He'll be the first trillionaire. I honestly believe he will be the first trillionaire. But
the point is
he didn't care about the money. It was the principle that people were being lied to that really upset him.
All those people have these tiny houses anyway because they're like, I just want to focus on my business.
Yeah, look at Elon. He has basically, I think in Boca Chica, Texas, his house is a 3-bedroom, very small house. It cost him like $45,000 to build, and it
doesn't even take a salary.
And the guy doesn't even take a salary because it's not about money. It's about making a difference in the world.
I bet he thinks about how many jobs can I make, how many problems can I solve, and he's an engineer at heart. So how many things can I build?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at those kinds of things, and that's somebody who granted, he's got an extremely amazing gift from God. He's extremely smart, but he looks at problems, he figures out a solution, how to solve them, and then he implements his plan.
And I always wonder with a man like that if he had married a good wife, because he's had trouble with people, and it's just like.
Yeah, I can't say I agree with him on his choices. I mean, the guy's got a lot of kids with a lot of different women.
And I know a lot of young business guys, and I always challenge them. I'm just like, imagine that we could take over those spots and be a good example to our customers, to the kids who look up to us, to the media made about us. We need good Christian businessmen. That's always my thing, because what if you could create stable jobs instead of cutting costs to make your stock price go up? You know, it's just like,
Absolutely.
that's what I always think about with my agency too. You know, we have one of our first video gigs, and it's like, I'm like, I gotta help create a job for one of my buddies online. I'm like, that's so cool, you know, and that's how I want to look at it. But back to our topic.
Well, so, actually, believe it or not, I can tie exactly what you said in there. Life is about helping people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so you want a wife who is going to help you be a better person, versus pulling you down, because it's already tough enough as it is. But so you lift your wife up, she's lifting you up, and you're growing into one.
And what happens when you have a bad day? You've invested in that relationship so much. You've helped selflessly, that then they're like, I should therefore selflessly help you.
Yes.
You know, and a quote I always tell myself is, God helps us win in all ways, because it's like, you look at it, it just seems like serving is such a simple thing, but you look at the complicated outputs of that. It's like, I selflessly help this person, that person, that person, and all of a sudden my house burns down. Well, I have 40 people I know to come help me move my stuff because I'm in a good church community, whatever, because I had helped them when their house had a problem or whatever, because, and that's, you don't do it for that reason, but it's just a natural.
You do because you care about that individual.
Yeah, you care about the people. You don't care about, I'm going to use them or I'm going to whatever. You have the right motive.
Yeah,
but
the thought behind why you're doing it is a righteous thought.
To serve.
To help, because life is hard, it's complicated, and you want that person who is on your side.
Have you figured it out yet?
Have I figured out life? No. I mean, I'm a lot closer than I was, and that's why I like having these conversations, is because, again, why sit there and make Charlie Puffer's mistakes?
Whenever
If
I'm
you
talking
can
about,
avoid it, if you can avoid it.
whenever I'm talking about doing something dumb, you'll just be like, on the phone, he'll be like, Alan. I'll be like, all right, listen.
And that's also why you need to be truthful with the person you're dating. You know, if they're looking to get in your pants, they're probably not a biblical person, either guy or girl. You know,
The problem is those people are more common nowadays. The person that wants purity, you might need to look for a while.
Yep.
But
what do you want? Do you want a milk cow that's been milked 1,000 times, or do you want a milk cow that's just starting to produce milk? That's what it boils down to.
Proverbs and Song of Solomon talks about a well, a cistern, right? Yep. Drink from your own well, you know.
Yep. What do you want? And those are the critical questions you got to ask yourself. You know, what does my life look like? You know, and
it comes down to mentorship too. If you have, you know, if your parents were split or they just have a rough relationship, or people close to you don't have something that you want to live by, but they're who's you've listened to your whole life, then change your environment. You know, open up your mind to people that do follow the biblical standard and get closer and spend more time with older godly men, older godly women that know how to do life God's way. Because then when you come around, you won't repeat your family's mistakes. If your family's in that case, you know, just it's not the 5 people you're around the most, it's the 5 people you look up to the most. Your heroes. Who are your heroes? Who do you look up to for mentorship, right? And
honestly, as you know, unfortunately, in today's age, you know, children are, you know, there's a lot of folks that I sit there and they let their kids run wild, like they're more of a burden than a blessing, and it's because there's no discipline.
Like I know so many families that the kids don't want to be at the sports game and the parents don't want there either, but they're just there because of community obligation. They don't actually sit and think, what is best use of our time? I'm not saying sports are bad. I'm just saying, like, they don't spend time together, right? He's out there on the field with all his other, you know, I would say we're natural idiots when we're kids because we don't know anything. And a fool surrounded by fools does not make an expert, you know, and that's why I always have an issue with the current education.
Very well put.
You know, a companion of fools suffers harm. So you look at our current education system, and like the world is literally stacked against Christian values, because the devil's had thousands of years to plan and perfect and play with our surroundings. But you got to look at, who do you surround yourself with? Especially, like, when I was 15, I really that's kind of when I realized, like, okay, I can drive now. I really had a say on where I could go and what I could do with my time. I kind of woke up, and that's when I started, by God's grace alone. The year before, I tried to kill myself. So God's grace alone, I started going to Bible studies. I started doing kids ministry, and it put such a good foundation so I can build into my next stage of life right now.
Tell me your friends, I'll show you your future. You surround yourself with good people, very rarely does it end tragically.
Yeah.
It's the extreme.
It'll bite you once out of 1,000 versus getting punched in the face every day by your bad friends, So.
And what if that person that you married is a bad person? I've seen many good men and women go down because of a bad partner.
In today's day, this is my opinion at least, I see so many great women marry not great guys. I don't know why. I see, and then their character goes down. Like, and I see it with guys too, but I just see, like, there's so many godly people that marry not godly people, and it just neutralizes their efforts for God's kingdom, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that,
becomes draw with the devil.
Yeah.
I knew going into my marriage, my wife was not strong in faith, but boy, let me tell you, that faith has grown tremendously, especially in the last 4 years, just absolutely tremendously. Yeah. And, we've got a better marriage than we ever had. But again, I didn't take those same steps I'm telling you to do. It's just hindsight 2020, experience. I got the gray. I earned it the hard way. And the goal is for you not to earn it the hard way, for you to be a thinking human being. Why am I doing this? Why am I turning on the TV when I could be studying the Bible? It's making those conscious choices.
I stayed in a hotel for the first time in a while on Friday to do a video project, and like the news was on in the lobby. I just watched it for a few minutes. I'm like, people watch this every day. I'm like, and the first thought I had was like, is this actually even? Because you tell me every day about, the news is wrong about this, the news is wrong about that. He's my politics guy mentally. I'm like, I just ask him what's going on, and I don't watch the news. It's great. Now I need to get off my phone in other areas and improve, but just in that area of my life, I'd say I'm pretty straight. And like, I just watch it for a few minutes. I'm like, there's so much strife. They have so much anger and intention. It's just like, what you're around, what you take in is so important,
If you have somebody constantly going, the world is going to end, which eventually, yes, it will. Don't make any mistake about that. But
are you more likely to party or think long term with someone that's like, well, we're gonna die tomorrow?
Yeah, we're gonna die tomorrow. We might as well drink her up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 30 years later, you realize as you're turning 40 or 50, you realize, man, I'd really like to have a lot of that money and a lot of that time back.
Financially speaking, most babies are worth more than most Americans when they're born because they don't have debt. So it's just like, you rack up the credit card, you get way too much mortgage, you get, Americans are just cutting down their own foundation financially, spiritually, ethically, and like, we got to take those things back, because but
I think you see that in today's climate. I think people have finally reached the point that, hey, I'm tired of sitting there identifying these issues and nobody's willing to do it. And we're finally starting to elect leaders that are going, hey, these are big issues. We need to solve these now because literally our country is at stake. And, if the country was to ever fall, do you think we are going to get back what we currently have? Literally the freedom to express our thoughts. There's countries that us talking like this on, and I've been in them.
They're waiting to jump on us when we get weak,
I've been in those countries. But if we were having the same conversation over the internet, they would come and the police would arrest me and lock me up.
But they're not going to just kill you.
So, and depending on what country it is, yeah, you could end up dead for sure. But those are the things we got to think about. You know, do you have somebody that is that person convicted like you are on, doing the right thing, making the hard calls? Because, boy, I have seen some men fold under some extreme conditions, and it's usually the wife that can bring them back around. So who do you want in your corner of life? And is that partner? Are you so far aligned that nothing can shake your faith? Nothing, no matter how bad life appears to be, you got to trust that this is what you got to go through for God to make you the person you are. And,
Exactly.
And if you look at that, and your partner is lockstep with you in those hard times, man, invaluable. We almost lost my son. His appendix exploded, and that would have been. See, that would have been 2006. We were getting ready to PCS from Alaska. My son had been having pain, there had been a bug going around in Alaska. And
how old had you been?
He'd have been 10, 11. He'd have been 10. No, he'd have still been 10. And literally it ruptured inside of his abdomen, and he walked around with it. We figured it ruptured on a Thursday, and then it was Sunday afternoon, because we were getting ready to leave the following week to drive the Alchem. My wife was like, maybe we should just take him in. And then they took him in, and his white blood cell count was normal. White blood cell count for a kid was 9 to 12,000. His white blood cell count was over 26,000, and it was pretty touch and go. I mean, his intestines had pretty much shut down. His kidneys were barely putting out enough, and he was on the verge of death.
You just think about all those little things that come up in life, and I need to look up the verse sometime, but there's a verse in Isaiah that says, our people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And you gotta just think, imagine you hadn't seen, my kid's crying a little bit. Like, some parents might just be like, oh, he's just complaining. He ate something bad or whatever. Give it a few days. He dies. Right? Think about how many scenarios are caused by the ignorance of our people. So it's just, the Lord really got, through a few things indirectly, a few sermons ago, my pastor, without even looking at it, looked directly at me. He's like, what's your plan for 2025 to get in the Word? And he didn't even know, but he was literally twice in that sermon, looked directly at me, and I was just like, well, I need to get in the Word. So I bought the Bible in audiobook, and I've been listening through it. It's like a whole new perspective on the Old Testament, because I'm hearing about the story, not just one verse, not a few verses a day, like, man, what is this? It makes no sense, but a few chapters at a time, whole different perspective on the Bible. And I was raised around my whole life. It's just, you got to ask yourself, are you investing in yourself and what you know and what you're doing, so that when those hard times come, I heard a stat on it. It's like one unpredictable thing's going to happen every month. Like, something's going to break, something's going to go wrong, something, relationship or whatever. So it's like, expect the unexpected and pursue wisdom, and then back to relationship stuff. How valuable would that be?
Yeah. Well, in the case of that, what ended up happening was I was sitting there staying home with my younger son during the day, and then when my wife had reached her emotional limit with my son in the hospital, then she would come home, spend time with my youngest boy, and then I would go to the hospital, and I would spend time with my son until we got to where, and even I had and then, it'd get midnight, 1 o'clock, and then he was asleep, so I'd go home and get 4 or 5 hours of sleep and go to my wife and cry, and she'd be crying for me because we were worried about losing our boy. And just, it made us very much stronger as a family.
You guys were getting along at that time.
Yeah.
So what could be
always just being dramatic.
Yeah, so it's like you would have came crying, and then she would just been like, "Leave me alone," And then what would have happened, right? A wedge instead of a growing moment. So yeah,
That's why I say it's very important to know what you want in a partner.
as much as it sucks, hard times are when we grow the most. I think God made us in a way that when we are under pressure, we grow and we flourish. You know.
The greatest growth comes out of the greatest adversity. Somebody who, grew up in the projects of Chicago and saw all the death and destruction that is happening in some of those projects and made the conscious decision that, hey, I'm not going to die when I'm 18, 19, 20 years old. And they've seen that death and they've seen that hurt and they've seen a community tore apart by violence and ungodliness.
Level 2 is a missionary who served in their 40 years and they're 60 years old talking in front of a church. It's like they are very great people to listen to.
And then they turn around and they become somebody, they make something out of their life and they have a good life. And, because they know what they want. So that's kind of things you got to just think about, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old. If you're chasing money, that ain't worth it. It ain't worth it. You can get all the money in the world, and guess what? If you ain't wise with the money, it's going to cause just as much stress as having none.
It's not about the money. It's not about the sex. It's not about the power. It's about you chasing it. That's the wrong thing. So if you chase God and then ask him for those things and give up your desire to him, he often redeems it and makes it better in all areas of life. Like when I was selfish and I was like, I'm going to go run my business and do this a big thing. You checked me on it a while ago. Always remember that Friday you bought me a steak. He's like, with my family, he's like, you got to stop isolating. You got to start, habits I'm working on. And he's like, you got to work on this. And I see you talking about money a lot right now. You're not talking about God. And then a few weeks later, this wasn't that long ago. Like, there's these things we have. We're human. 2.5 months ago? Yeah. It wasn't long. Yeah. And I was very close to going downhill, but he checked me. So you need to have, and that's why I don't have a credit card, because I think about when I'm emotional and stressed, what's in my wallet? To quote, yeah. But my point is,
that would make me feel good. Yeah. Which some people do,
It's just like, what do you have around you or not have around you is everything. And why do you want it? And if you want the wrong things, repent about it and God will help you.
And it was kind of funny because I was like, well, my dad and I aren't getting along. He's so bullheaded. I'm like, no, I see both of you being bullheaded, but, and that's okay. I mean,
what did it teach me? It taught me that when I see no good in anything, the devil's won in my heart and I need to give it to God.
Exactly. That's the whole point. When it's at such a big impasse, because when we had that conversation with Alan, I said, I don't understand how you can be mad at your dad. I said, yes, I get communication issues. Okay, I get that. He just wants what's best for you. But I said, ultimately, he gave you the biggest gift you can ever, you can never repay the man for the gift he gave you. And that's the knowledge of Christ.
Yeah.
He can never repay his father. Because I will tell you, there are very few men like this young man here, who know the word and who understand what's at stake, for eternity. He sent me a video. What was that, last week? It might have been the week before. The sermon, it's an old Tim Conway sermon from 1994. Hell is necessary. And it talks about the sanctity of hell, which I didn't think you could talk about the sanctity of hell, but that man surely did. And
he said in the sermon, I don't want to talk about this. It's a heavy thing. I want to talk about prayer, but God would not let it leave my mind.
Yep. And I will tell you, it was just, I had never seen that sermon and I had never quite thought like that man had thought. And
another one I'm going to send you right now.
It just changed my life. What's at stake? 100 million people die a year. Clicking. Boom, boom, boom. Every second. It's like 3 every second across this world.
There's another one I listened to yesterday that's really good. It's called Keep a Clear Conscience. It looks like this by I'll Be Honest, Sister Ministry of Paul Washer, and ran by Tim Conway, I think. And it just talked about the fourth pillar of you have fellowship, you have prayer, you have reading the Bible in whatever order. They're all the same importance. He added a fourth one, keeping a clear conscience before the Lord. That hit me really hard yesterday. Where every day you're like, did I choose to do wrong or did I choose to do right?
Absolutely.
Because hardening your heart, right? Or preventing that. And so highly recommend those two.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I love it when somebody, and I've got another buddy that I talk to usually every other day, or if we're having struggles every day. I got about 4 really good friends I can call and I can count on. And
I recently just picked up on those. What a blessing. Oh my goodness.
What a blessing. Exactly.
To call them every day. And sometimes you have to be the one to actively call them.
Yeah.
But
yep.
It's awesome. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
But the whole point is, as you continue to grow on your journey with Christ, I mean, it's amazing. You think, oh man, I really got this down, and then somebody sends you something from a trusted, what you would consider a trusted source, and they totally change your perspective. You're like, holy cow, I've never thought of it in this spiritual sense of well, for example, if I lie to Alan, I hurt him, sure, right? But who's the sin against?
God.
There you go. Think about that.
Technically both, but especially God.
Yes, I hurt him, but I sinned against God.
And I would recommend you guys listen to, it's a little boring at first, but you really kind of get into it and you start really thinking about it. I've been listening to the ancient law in the Old Testament, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. I'm in Numbers right now. And I went through Leviticus today as I was just cleaning up my apartment and stuff. It's insane. Just listening to the law. And it's like the iniquity is against me. God talks about it. It's like he talks about like a debt. In order to pay off their debt, do this, do that. And it's just like, and
nobody could keep the law.
Nobody could, yeah.
So what did God do? He said, I'll come down. I will pay the debt. That's huge. Think about it. He literally got persecuted.
God killed
denied,
God to justify us before God.
Denied that he was the Messiah. Beaten, stabbed, nailed to a cross. Also that you have a shot at eternal heaven because nobody can follow the law. That's why there was a new covenant made. And you think about that. That's how much God loves you. And it just to me it is just so amazing. And God hates sin, and it's amazing. I can look through my journey, being from a young kid to now 50 years old, and it's amazing how God has changed my thoughts. I used to lust after women all the time. Even as a married man, I used to look. It was just, and then as my journey grew and grew and grew,
God bakes it in.
Man, you start going, well, those thoughts aren't of God, Charlie. You better modify your thinking. And then you ask the good. Then you sit there and you pray and you go, God, I have been a horrible human being. I've had these lustful thoughts, or I've had these thoughts, or I did this or I did that, whatever it is. I need you. I need your help. I need you to change my thinking. And man, it did. I look at a girl now, and it isn't lust. It's, man, why is she? What is going on in that young lady's life that she thinks she has to walk around naked to get good attention, or halfway naked, to get good attention, to be appreciated. And it's just because of our priorities and what man's worldview has taught us, versus teaching about what a woman should be. You got man's worldview of what a woman should be, and well, boys can sleep around, girls should sleep around too. Well, I'll tell you, that doesn't bode well for either sex.
Neither.
What
these high and mighty dudes like, what's that one's name? Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, whatever. What makes them, quote, feel high and mighty, it's just a substitute. Remember the structure of authority. As we serve God, then, like whether you're a low-level janitor or a top executive at some organization, whether ministry, whatever, or a business, like there's authority above you and below you for a reason, and it locks you in. It makes life a lot simpler to follow because you're not just out there winging it. We're made to depend on something. And as we depend on something, so we worship it. And that's why we're made just for God. When we do that for anything else, like what's a common example is where, as far as I understand this, I'm still new to this stuff, but when I understand this stuff, as far as I understand, like, when God means helpmate, he means to go along with and help with. But when guys make women the mission, it makes the women feel awful, right? And it just cancels out. And, it doesn't, I've never seen it end well. I've seen it blow up. But it's, versus a man who is focused on doing God's work and doing God's will. And then they as a couple do it together and just following God's natural structures of authority. It doesn't make you trapped. It doesn't make you whatever. It doesn't lock you into anything. It actually grants you the most freedom. Because
it does.
Like if you had no law, there would be no freedom because everyone would be, it's like, oh, I want chicken today and there's no store, so I go steal from his chickens. Now he's going to starve. There's no, anarchy or whatever. That's why there's certain things certain structures of authority protect us, and there's freedom within God's way of doing it. Like every law I'm reading about in the Old Testament right now is about, do this to do that. And I think about the science, like don't eat pork, don't eat anything with a paw on it, don't eat predators because they carry the disease of everything. And pigs back then carried a lot of disease because of just, it was just wild. There was no medical technology. There was no,
very primitive.
If someone threw up, wash your whole house, scrape it clean, right? And I'm like, that seems harsh. And they had to sacrifice a lot of birds. I was like, you'd have to have I was thinking about that. That's a whole other side tangent. But you'd sacrifice and you would clean every time something dirty happened. But I'm like, imagine how, once they did all those things, imagine how free, clean their streets would be, how good of a culture there'd be. Even today, look at the most successful people. Often they're of the Jewish mindset. It's very interesting. Yeah. So it's just like God, even though you look at them individually, it doesn't make much sense, but you look at the truths when they start to parallel and they start to cross each other and build this system of life. It's a very beautiful life and a very free life,
Well, I read an article. I read an article today that there was a woman who in 12 hours slept with 1,200 men. Think about that. That's what she's doing. That's what she thinks her worth is. I think it's sad. I feel very sad for her that she has been, oh yeah, it might bring her in a lot of money on whatever channel she's on, but what has she given up? Her dignity. If you really think about it, giving up her dignity.
You look at ancient history and until recently, didn't Phil do a sermon on the Song of Solomon? He talked about, I listened to that one. My parents sent it to me about, it's a dating thing he's doing, ironically.
I did. Well, see, I was down at Cody's. I haven't watched this week. I haven't watched last week's sermon. So
my wife, Bill Hopper, highly recommend it. And he also, but you also think about, he talked about in the ancient day, and think 300 years in prior, all of human history, if a woman didn't have her virginity, she was almost downcast in the entire culture. Why? People back then understood something that when you lose that, it can almost destroy you because of the connection it brings. And it's just there's importance to these things, and our culture is just throwing everything away, the baby with the bathwater. It's like, what are we actually losing, and
Yeah.
what are we.
And it's sad because that would be one young lady I would love to reach out and say, why do you think you have to do this? God has so much more planned for you than this. But just people get so lost, and it's sad that they think that their value is selling their body, for dollars. It's just so sad that they don't know that and I think even my parents' generation probably did a much worse job at teaching Christianity than the previous generation. As time goes by, it seems like there's less and less.
As they were a quiet generation, so we're loud, but now everyone's loud about absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and that's scary.
And that's why we need to speak wisdom to be wise with what we say.
And it's not judging. I don't judge that lady for her actions. I just go, where was her dad to say, honey, you are special. You were made in the image of God. You know, this is not money is not the important thing. You know, and I would love to put my arms around her and say, God has such a bigger purpose for you in life. And
The framework I have with when I look at just random decisions, I don't have my Bible next to me, guys. I ask, how does this serve God? How does this help people? And how does this bring value? Because it's just like, that's what I always look at. And I just look at all these decisions people make. I'm like, not judging them, like you say. It's like, what are we doing here? How is this, what is this doing? And how is this damaging you?
How did we get to the point how did we get to the point in the decision making that she thought that was her best option? Again, not judging her. It's just when you look at the reality of it. And, there was, I think a month ago, there was another gal. She did a bunch of guys in 24 hours. And I'm just like, and and it was sad because she was so uneducated that she didn't realize that, and it was a good amount of men in 24 hours. I don't think it was as high as this other gal who did like 1,200 or 1,100, 1,000 in 12 hours. But, at one point when she was given the interview after she had done what she had done, she goes, it gets to the point, she goes, I really just started disassociating with what was going on. So it was not pleasant for her by any means. But then somebody said, aren't you worried about HIV and these diseases? And she didn't know that HIV could be transferred between fluids. And, you're sleeping with more people in one day than most people sleep with in an entire lifetime, and
God's design. One, monogamous, heterosexual relationship via marriage. And that's what it was meant to be.
Yeah. It was meant to be a gift, a beautiful gift. And like I said, I'll be the first one to say, I blew it. My oldest boy did not. My youngest boy blew it. It is what it is. And just, it's sad what choices I made.
Business, which often leads into psychology and other things, and I just learn more about I think the biggest skill that I'm working on myself is I want to become a good leader and a good networker, right? Just with what I plan on doing with my life and what I think feel called to. And it's like, as I learn about those things, as I read about those things, I can read people in their eyes. I see people that I know have lived like that, or at least I've heard about it, and their eyes just seem down. They seem downcast. I've seen people that, took the time and to do it God's way, and they have a light in their eyes.
Yeah,
They have,
and that doesn't mean that.
and there's hope.
It doesn't. Yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't mean like I will tell you, you know, throughout my life, like I said, I grew up Catholic. I was raised Catholic. When I went joined the military, I went Baptist because I had issues with the Catholic Church. And I'm not saying that the Catholic Church is wrong. That's not my intention here. I just spiritually it didn't mesh with my beliefs.
Yeah.
And but the thing that happens is that shame ends up building up from my experience. And you get to the point where you're like, God can never love me. 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 I know all the wicked things we do. It's the things that keep us up at night when we sit there and we know God exists, but we're not doing his will and we're not living like a Christian. That shame builds up. And that's what the devil wants, of course, because he shames you so bad that, well, if I ever told people how I was, they're going to look at me differently.
Good analogy I heard from Paul Washer. Imagine someone took your life and they got a projector. It was like a CD projector. And they took your life, everything that you had thought, done, and seen in private, and they put it on a CD and they were going to push play. You would either destroy that projector or like become extremely violent. If it managed to get played, you would never show your face in that community or even that country again because you would just be so ashamed. Yet we all do it. We all think that way.
And that's the beauty of Christ.
Yeah,
because
he redeems those things.
He redeems those things. So and that's kind of how I look at this podcast. I did the wrong thing. I'm telling you guys, life is much easier when you do the right thing. And when you think and think and think and think in a healthy way, and you tell those stories, not boastful that, oh, I begged, I did, I was running around. No, you do it with humility of, hey guys, this is not the way to go, but you get rid of the shame by telling the truth of, hey, I've lived that lifestyle and it is not the way to go. Don't make my mistake. It makes life so much harder.
What's beautiful about how God redeems things, your testimony about how you may not have done it right helps a young guy like me say, here's how I could do it. It points me, it becomes a compass for the next generation to not do or to do something different and to do it right.
God will take all bad and use it for good.
I've had a few nights.
And I'm a living example of it. I'm 100% a living example of taking something that was definitely not good and becoming a much, I was actually bad, and becoming a much, much better man. Much, much better man. Like I said, I look back at my younger days and I'm just like, boy, I am glad we have a merciful God. And I'm glad that he's taken the thoughts that I used to think away about all the different women and all that good junk. I'm glad it's gone.
Just think about the day, it's like back then you're like, you took pride in it and maybe, but now, the shame compounds, but also the good things compound. Do you want to go to bed with tears in your eyes because God's been so faithful and you see it? Or do you want to go to bed with tears in your eyes of what have I done? And I can tell you from experience having those nights where you're like, thank you, God.
Sucks.
Like,
it sucks.
You're like, thank you, God. Thank you so much. Those are the nights you want to have where you have seen God's good things,
I can tell you it sucks, and it sucks badly because you end up feeling more and more and more alone. But that's what that's the whole goal of the devil, though. That's what he wants to do. He wants to isolate you, think that you can't receive salvation. I mean, it's just absolutely insane.
He either kills you with shame or he kills you with ignorance, where you
Yep.
either don't know or you know too much and you don't think you can go to God.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, like I said, I look at it and I just, when I read headlines in the news of, like I said, you look in Chicago or you look in LA or Baltimore and you see all these young men dying for what? A gang. It just, and that to them is their best option because they literally have no hope and they don't know of God, or if they do know of God, they've decided.
Bad relationship. It's like,
Yeah.
and what happened? And then all those other people die, and then they're forgotten. Like there's nothing left.
There's nothing. And I, like I said, one of the most amazing things of our, I remember at the height of the Iraq-Afghanistan war, it was safer for an African American to be in the middle of an active combat zone than it was to be in a city in the United States. Think about it. It was safer for them to be in an active combat zone where people were actively trying to kill them. Statistically, they had a better shot being in an active war zone than they did in a town in America. It floors me. I sit here, 70,000 Americans a year are dying of drug overdoses, fentanyl and heroin, and the trank drugs and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, what are we doing? I think almost 20 years in Vietnam, we lost 70,000. We're losing 70,000 a year in the United States alone.
Yeah, Vietnam years to drugs.
Yeah.
What about
a Vietnam War casualty count?
That's just one form of evil. What about all the other ones? Abortion, rape, murder, all these other things. Oh,
it just, my heart hurts. And I sit there and I'm like, God, I just have to find a way to reach these people and talk about life. I would love it. I would love to be able to get somebody from the projects on a podcast and explain their life and to understand the thinking behind it. To understand the thinking that banging is the way to go. Gang banging is the way to go. It just blows my mind, And again, in my mind, I'm just absolutely appalled at my behavior as a younger kid. But then I see what some of these younger men are doing and the decisions they're making, and my heart hurts for them. It hurts because they have no hope from where they're seeing it. And I would love to know the mindset behind it. It just crushes me. Things like that just absolutely crush me. And seeing people, like I said, at the time I thought I was young and going to live forever. Well, guess what? You're not. Well, right, but the whole point is, I know somebody who I know of a person who just died and they were just about ready to turn 21. Oh, that happens to everybody else but me. Well, you don't know that. So you might want to be on the right side of eternity.
Like, let me tell you a dumb story. This happened to me like 2 days ago. So I mixed up a DoorDash order. So there's 2 apartment houses. And I was kind of out of it. I had just woken up from a nap. I should have been more aware. But whatever. Like, it happens, right? And there's a white house and a blue house. And I couldn't see the number, but I saw number 4. And I thought I was at the right house based on the map. So I go up these stairs. There's 2 stairs missing. And I'm on my phone just looking, like, am I at the right place? Just double checking before I'm a weird delivery guy walking to some random guy's apartment. And then I try walking on the air. I fall through the stair. That's why I always pray when I go out door dashing, like, Lord, protect me, because there's sometimes people, like the other night there was a truck that was like just driving really slow, and I was gonna try to pass him, and he swerved over. I'm like, Lord, thanks for keeping me out of that, because I was on a bridge, I would have been pinned and gone in the water. But on these stairs, I fall through, I catch myself, my phone bounces, the food flips and lands perfectly, and then my phone drops like 20 feet, and I could have dropped 20 feet, and that would have hurt. But it's just like, God spared me. But there might be another time within this year I might be door dashing, knock knock, bang. Like,
you never know.
Never know. So whatever job you're doing, or you hear the stories, some guy stocking shelves, and then the shelf just boom. Or we're carrying a loaded bomb inside us, call it our appendix or our liver. Like, one of those pops open, we're dead. There's so many things that can kill us.
Heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or some shooting range you don't know about, some stray bullet, whatever. Like,
yeah, you never know what's good. Life happens. That's the whole point.
Or I've seen those videos where like the tire just like pops off the wheel and then causes like 5 cars to crash. It's just like, you never know.
Caves the roof in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was in Alaska, I had a young man. I think I was a tech sergeant at that time. That would have been E6.
Was he eaten by a polar bear?
No. We actually had an air show, and the young man was. We had to go to town and get the rental cars for the air show, and he was coming back from the air show, and he was coming back from town, and a moose darted out in front of him and almost killed him. Literally was told he was never going to walk again. By the grace of God, he is walking. But it ended his military career. But, you don't know when it's going to happen. So, it's
you encounter with a moose, you're lucky to be alive. They're absolute monsters.
Well, yeah. But I mean, this wasn't even this was a calf moose, only 300-400 pounds, but it also went right through his windshield where he was sitting.
Because they usually jump, right? And then.
Well, the thing about moose's eyes is moose's eyes do not reflect. Like a deer, deer eyes, they reflect.
You can see them.
You can see them.
Mm-hmm.
It was late, and he was coming back.
He made the camo.
And he hit it and almost changed. He almost died. So we don't know when the time is going to be. So that's why it's important to be right with the Lord and
being right with the Lord and overall having a good mindset, right?
Having that good mindset.
Imagine you're just like, I have everything perfect right now, and nothing could go wrong. And then something does go wrong, you're gonna get depressed. You might not want to live anymore. All this different stuff. Versus like, whatever comes, whatever happens, whatever the Lord gives, He takes away. Whatever it's like, I don't need these things to succeed, even if I can't walk. And of course, it's easier said than done. But you always have to have that mindset of, I will do everything I can for God's glory. I will try my best. And I will do things to grow. But I might not, I might not have all these good things someday.
And as a young man, I used to be terrified of dying. But you know what? Looking back on it now, it's real easy to say why I was terrified of dying. I wasn't right with the Lord. I was nowhere close to right with the Lord.
Deep down inside, we know that if we're not right with God, something good isn't going to happen.
And the funny thing is,
good one. Thanks for watching Riskier.
And the good thing is, at this point, I could die on the way home tonight. I don't want to, but if I did, wouldn't bother me a bit, because I know where I'm going. And that's the ultimate peace.
The best Christians I know aren't suicidal, but they are not scared, or they're okay with dying because they know what's coming. To live as Christ, to die as gain.
Eternal life with the Father. I mean, look at everything, the whole universe. You look at it, it's amazing. Everything has to be where it is in the universe. It is so fine-tuned. The universe is so fine-tuned that if our sun wasn't the exact size with all the planets around it, Earth would not exist, which means we would not exist. That is the beauty of our Creator.
Yeah.
Everything that's in place around us is because
Like
He loved us that much.
Jupiter being a magnet to keep all the asteroids away and the gas giants.
Majority,
to,
yep. Yep. Keep majority of it away. But I mean, when you sit there and you think about the awesomeness of the Father, it blows me away. So why wouldn't you want a marriage that would be just as awesome? You know, why wouldn't you want to think about those critical questions of what do I want in life? What kind of partner do I want in life? You know, what kind of mom do I want raising my children? Do I want somebody who whole existence is making sure they look the best that they can look for everybody else?
And what kind of father and mother am I going to be?
And what kind of father and mother do I want to be? You know, I think one of the biggest disservices in the last 20 years is we've forgotten how to tell the truth. Again, I think that's changing. I think you're seeing it with the California wildfires. People are not tolerating the BS anymore. They're done with it. All the lies that are being told are being exposed. You know, and you look at that, and what kind of human being do I want to be? What kind of world do I want to leave my children? You know, you can leave them $1 million, that's great, but if they don't know Christ, you've committed their lives to hell. That's what you've done.
I mean, something I was reading in the Bible, Orion's belt. Like, God has the power to change Orion's belt. Like, He can move the stars. Exactly, Nick.
You know, and so what kind of world do you want to leave your children and grandchildren? What kind of legacy? The best legacy you can leave, you know. And if you don't know Christ, find somebody who does. You know, go to, you know, start looking online. What do I believe? And then read in the Word and make sure the Word matches that church. You know, like I think it's amazing. Like Abundant Life, that's Pastor Phil Hopper out of Kansas City. It's his ministry to me is just absolutely, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not about money. It is about creating community. You know, you watch all these televangelists and they're like, oh, money, 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 money. You know,
give us money or we won't survive. It's like, if God doesn't want your ministry to survive.
Yeah. It won't survive. If you're not sowing righteous, if you're not sowing good fruit, gotta make an example of you. But that's what we gotta look at. What do we want in life when it comes to dating? What are we thinking about? Do you even know what you want? Because until you know what you want and you've thought it through and you've asked all those critical questions we talked about today, doesn't matter, because you haven't put any thought into it.
Yeah, Nick, with that verse in Job, if that's true about the Greek god, about Orion's belt, God's also saying in Job, I have power over that god too. You know, it's interesting. Like, God says I can move the stars and I can control even though it's not real, you know.
He brings the stars into existence.
Yeah, knows them all by name. So.
Right. Well, I suppose Alan's got to get ready for work, and I got to get back to the farm. So, again, we're just here to talk life, and you know, we just want to talk and hopefully get people thinking and being thinking individuals, and so they know what they want. Especially
to make people think and to think about God. So,
and to think about God and align your views with the biblical, you know, is just having that conversation, and saving yourself till you meet that special someone. It makes it even more special. Anybody can open their legs or crawl on top of a woman. I mean, if you really think about it, but It takes a lot of skill and discipline not to do that before you're married. So that's just kind of my parting thoughts.
Trust in the Lord.
And trust in the Lord.
Well, thanks for watching the stream, everybody. And there's a guy I might ask who has an awesome testimony. I might see if we can interview him.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll let you all go. And thanks for watching. And I'll pray us out real quick. So, dear Father God, we thank you for everything, Lord. I pray as for you guys like me who are new to or haven't dated, just provide, and for young women too, provide them the skills and early wisdom before they get into it, and the provisions and the mentors and the environments to stay pure while they do it. And for the ones who maybe, through their ship on the rocks with it, that you can help them see that you have redemption in all things. I've seen beautiful couples who didn't do it right, but yet God, you gave them grace and mercy in those things. So I just pray, we all sin in different ways. It's a given. We're human. And if that was an area of life that people sinned in, if they're watching this on stream or on video or whatever, that you would just help them. Anyone, the voice of my words, and anyone not, that you would just help them understand that the grace you offer and the mercy you offer, Lord. Help us always have a heart and perspective for you. To spend time investing in ourselves, reading good books, but especially reading the good word. And to pray more and to be around good people and to have a good conscience before you, Lord, so that we can have a great and good life, working and walking hand by hand with you and with other good people in fellowship and doing good things, Lord. So thank you for this day and the good winter we've had in Iowa, or lack thereof. And just pray you bless everyone and help all come to know Christ. In your name, amen. Peace out, everybody.